Our topic for today is Davar Sheyesh Matirim. We're learning Siman Kuf Beis, Davar Sheyesh Matirim. I'm going to talk about, 5-6 things that have to do with Davar Sheyesh Matirim. But by and large, my hope is to not talk about anything that you've learned about, which is to say, I'm not going to talk to you about, about what it says. I might by mistake say something like that, but that's not really the goal. The goal is really, that's why I'm here, is because you want to hear, practical applications or things that you maybe didn't come across in your regular seeing things. Okay. Also, even though everybody's sitting in their regular places, feel free to say what you want to in the middle. I don't really want to sit here and talk for the next 45 minutes. So anybody wants to pipe in, please. Okay, I'm going to do it in a sort of order based on the order of the dinim. And that is it is. Okay, we'll start is two things that have to do with a common example of Davar Sheyesh Matirim. What most people consider Davar Sheyesh Matirim. A common example of that is Chadash. Okay, the Chadash means is we're not allowed to eat from the 5 main grains until they've lived through a Pesach. Okay, so that is to say, in practice, that means it's from about Rosh Hashanah till Pesach. There are certain foods that you can't eat. For those people who only eat Yoshon, they can't eat those certain foods. Okay, these 5 grains in their different ways, roughly from Rosh Hashanah, it works out to Pesach in practice. So that sounds like a very simple Davar Sheyesh Matirim because it's a food that today it's Aser and tomorrow it's going to be Mutter. If I have a cookie today that's Chadash, I can't eat it. Come, a few months from now, I'm going to be allowed to eat it. Okay, now there is a question. There is a question as to whether Chadash is considered Davar Sheyesh Matirim when it's owned by a Yid, and that is because if I own a cookie today and that cookie is Chadash, lots of the things that I would own that are Chadash are going to be Chametz also. So that is to say, before they become mutter on the first day of Chol Moed Pesach. Before that comes, they're going to become Aser because the own Chametz already come from Erev Pesach. So there's reason to think. Schachter said it this way, that we would assume that the thing is considered to be, that would not be considered Davar Sheyesh Matirim if the Yid owns it, because as it stands, it will not become mutter. Now, I know I could sell my chametz and I can get it in this and that, but as it stands, without anything happening, it would not be Davar Sheyesh Matirim. The simple cases where it is Davar Sheyesh Matirim are going to be, which is what we're going to talk about, is when someone who's not Jewish owns it. Okay, it's only also for a Yid to own chametz. But, and I have a question, should I buy this food, which has in it a question of bittul of Chadash mixed into it? Well, that's a question of Davar Sheyesh Matirim. That is Davar Sheyesh Matirim because come a few months from now it's going to be mutter. Today I can't eat it, but tomorrow I can. So that's a typical, and we're going to assume that it's a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. So now, there's an item called malt, or it's called barley malt, or malted barley extract, all the same thing. And that is, if you take barley, not the barley you have in your house, the full grain of barley before you remove the outer layers. The full barley seed, and you stick it into water, into a warm environment, it starts to grow. Okay? What it does is to start to grow is it creates and releases an enzyme. Okay? That cutie little piece of barley creates an enzyme, okay? And that enzyme breaks down the starch that the barley is made out of, and it turns it into a sugary, sweet substance. And then that sweet substance is something that the barley plant can live off of, enough to start growing roots and growing leaves, and then once it's starting to grow, then it lives off the environment. Okay, but to get it going for the first couple of days, all that energy is packed into that little seed, and it turns the starch into sugar, into a sweet sugar, and then that sugar it could make things out of, and it goes for the first couple of days. Okay, that sweet, the enzyme that it produces and the sweet sugar that it makes are very desirable. Okay. And they're used for different kinds of products. So, if you have barley malt or malted barley, it's all the same types of stuff, and you have it grown, stuff that was planted after Pesach, we have some that's a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. And now, what happens if that gets mixed into other foods? Okay, so now, the simplest thing you make out of that is beer. Okay, so the beer is there's no Tevillas. It's just plain old barley turned into beer. Okay, so if it's Chadash, it's Chadash, you're finished. Okay, you can't eat that. Yes?
You're putting aside Schechter's heter for Chadash, right?
I'm saying we're working with the assumption that it is Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Okay, it is. For example, it's owned by someone who's not Jewish. Okay, I'm working with that assumption that it's not considered that it is a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. So if it was beer, it's not a question of a Tevillas. There's no Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Okay, but what happens if you look on at home, you've got a bag of flour. Lots of flour has barley malt mixed into it. Okay, lots of flour. Regular wheat flour has barley malt into it for whatever reason why they add that in. Okay, in tiny amounts they add that in. Okay, so it's a typical taruvis. You're taking flour and mixing in this barley malt into it. Now, if I know that my flour is Yoshon, for example, it's winter wheat, so I know it's Yoshon, but mixed into it is this tiny amount of malted barley mixed into it. Or what if I have cornflakes? Take cornflakes and Rice Krispies almost always have barley mixed into them. So what happens if they have this? So the corn is obviously, it's not a Yoshon or a Chodesh question because it's not one of the 5 grains. So what do I do about the fact that in it is mixed this small amount of something that's Chodesh in there? Now, there's its own question of maybe it's not both because it's Avitul Taima. Okay? And that's its own question as to whether maybe in certain of these things, let's say in the cornflakes, maybe it's Avitul Taima. Okay? Most assume that it's not because it contributes a similar taste to what's in there before. It's a little more unique, but that's its own question. Maybe it's not both because it's Avitul Taima. But in flour, it's not Avitul Taima. It's just there, a tiny amount. Yes? So the answer is correct. The answer is that when the malted barley is in my flour, because in my flour that's min b'she'enimina, okay? The din of Davar Sheyesh Matirim only applies to min b'mina. Okay, so we don't have to worry about it when it's mixed into my flour or it's mixed into my cornflakes. It doesn't make a difference. Now, that a variation of that happened when there was once a company was making Yoshon flour, and by mistake, Chodesh flour got mixed into it. I'm not talking about this happened in a kitchen. We're talking about, thousands of pounds of flour, and by mistake they got Chodesh flour mixed into it, and the Chodesh flour, there was so little of it that it would have been bottled. Okay, the Chodesh flour was in the formulation they were making would have been bottled, but it was Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Here they were sitting, and here it was flour and flour. Okay, here it was flour and flour. We weren't going to get away with the fact of saying, oh, it's min b'she'enimina, which is an easy kula. When I come to my regular flour, it's flour with barley. Those are 2 different things. So over there, I don't remember the numbers in the end, but there, I'm mentioning it to remind you of another rule. Okay, there's the rule of salekes minoi kamisha enoi. We can ignore the fact that there's flour and flour and say, wait a second, maybe the Chodesh flour is bottled into the corn or the rice or everything else that's in the formula, whatever these people are trying to make, that we don't have to just look at the flour. We don't say, oh, it's min b'mina. It's true, it's min b'mina. We can ignore the min b'mina and just deal with min b'she'enimina and see if then potentially if it could be bottled. Otherwise, yes, we'd be up the creek and it would have been Davar Sheyesh Matirim, and we'd say Davar Sheyesh Matirim is not bottled. Okay?
That's assuming that the wheat that was mixed in wasn't itself Chodesh. It was wheat that was Yoshon with malt in it.
No, I'm talking about that it was actually Chodesh wheat in Yoshon wheat.
So where's the salad here?
So then there are other things in the formulation. There are other things that were in there that we could say, well, it's flour and flour. So now we do have min b'mina. We often don't. Malt is not min b'mina, but in this kind of case, it would have been min b'mina. But we can ignore the min b'mina and deal with just the min b'she'enimina to make ourselves be bottled and make a mutter.
You would have to have an enormous amount.
It depends on the formulation. It depends on what you're dealing with. Again, in your house, that's not common to happen because you don't put in such tiny ingredients. Here it was a mistake in a company, and they mixed in this and that, and the wrong things got mixed together. Then, if it worked, it worked. I don't remember the end of the story if it worked or didn't work. Okay, but that was the approach. But was that's have to look at it, ignore the flour, and look at everything else. Yes.
When we're dealing with salads, there's a whole meeting whether. I'm just trying to think what it is. You were talking about min b'she'enimina in shame, not in tam, right? When we're dealing with the keilim for Davar Sheyesh Matirim.
We care about whether it's. I would have guessed tam, but you tell me.
I thought that we had come out from the shop that we care about shame.
Okay.
When you go above shishim, so it's not a shot of tam anymore. So the
Okay. Okay.
I just when we were applying salik, so there's an idain. I don't remember how it plays out. I don't know, that's case. Salik applies side whether we're dealing with time and side whether we're dealing with shame. I just don't remember how that plays out.
As far as I know. Okay. Let's move to a different angle of the same question. Okay? And that is like this. I told you, first I told you about barley, malted barley, which is for sure, which is chametz. Okay. Now I'm going to talk to you about things that are not chametz. Okay, with that idea that maybe it's not Davar Sheyesh Matirim doesn't make sense anymore, and that is like this: if you wanted to make Yoshon flour or Yoshon barley, well, the logic that we would all think to do, which is what they used to do, was you take let's say your barley, harvest the barley, you process it. It's a thing called pearling, which is you scrape off the outer layers. Okay, so what you have in your house is called pearled barley, or it means they scraped off the outer layers that are not edible. You do that, and then you hold on to it. And then you say, now I'm going to keep this to last until next Pesach. Okay, I do all the work I need to do so that it'll be ready till next Pesach. Or my flour, I take the wheat, I mill it into flour, and then I put it away, and I save it for next Pesach. The problem was, that's how they used to do it. The problem was, when they did that, was that by the time the middle of the winter would come, they would start getting bugs in their flour, or bugs in the barley. Now, it depended how you didn't always get that. It depended on how you store it. If you store it in refrigerated storage, like they used to do here, North Shore Bakery used to do, they used to take stuff and put away truckloads of stuff into refrigerated storage, then you won't grow any bugs and you'll be fine. And it could last forever. Okay? But it's expensive to put in refrigerated storage. So what they would do is they would take the flour, mill it, do what they have to do with it, and just put it away. And if it sits for long enough, it'll get buggy. And the reason why is because the companies who make these products take tremendous steps to get rid of all the bugs, and even the bug eggs, and they're very, very successful. But very successful means 99.999, how many nines they can get it off. Okay? But they can't get everything. Okay? Try as they might, they can't get everything. So it's good enough to last for a couple of months. Give it a while, eventually, you have many, many dozens of bugs that are growing inside of your flour. Eventually comes to the point that people start noticing it, okay? You only have to have one egg, and in a few days you have a zillion friends, So you have to, so that it wasn't such a workable solution for companies, in particular, when bigger companies started getting involved in this. They said, quality-wise, they won't sell that product. They said, we can't hold stuff for 4 or 5 months and then start selling that as Yoshon. So, yeah.
Most of the wheat on the market is winter wheat.
Do you want to know if you go to the supermarket?
The wheat that you're describing, the majority of it is...
It depends. It depends if the guy's processing winter wheat or spring wheat. It depends what he's doing. If it's a plant that processes winter wheat, then it's always Yoshon. If he's planting spring wheat, then there's a changeover. At a certain point, it's mainly Yoshon, and eventually becomes mainly Chodesh. There's a point when it switches over. When the new crop comes in, now it's Chodesh. There's a little, time that takes to transfer over, but okay. So they decided was.
So what is wheat? In which season does wheat normally grow?
Wheat gets, there's 2 crops of wheat. There's 2 main crops of wheat, winter and spring. Winter wheat was already planted now. It grows a little bit, stays dormant for the winter. It gets harvested after Pesach. Like Shavuos time, it gets harvested. That's always Yoshon. Spring wheat gets planted right around Pesach time. It gets harvested later in the summer, and then till next year.
One field brings 2 harvests?
No,
different areas?
Different things. Different people grow. Either you grow winter or spring wheat.
Oh.
Okay, so the issue with milling it or pearling it as you need it is the following. You took your you took your grain that was Yoshon, okay, or your barley that was Yoshon, and you put it away. And you said, when we need it, we're going to mill it when we need it, so it won't like growing bugs in it. Okay, so today, right now it's where are we at? January. It's January. It's like, let's go mill some of the flour. Well, the flour mill's been running Chodesh for months already. You put your stuff out of the way. You put yours on the side, and you said, when it comes the right time, I'm going to mill it. When I'm ready to do it, that's when I'm ready to sell it, I'm going to mill it. Well, they've been processing Chodesh until now. And what happens is, you want to guess how often flour mills clean their factories?
Never.
Approximately never. Okay, I don't mean that they never wipe things out, but do they never clean it out to get at every speck of flour? There's no reason to. Barley, they never, they may flush some out, they may blow it out, but they're not going to get every single one. Now, if barley is a Davar Sheyesh Matirim, I only have to have 1 kernel of Chodesh barley in there to mess up my whole batch. When you say to people, did we get every kernel out? Of course we didn't get everyone out. Okay? If the machine holds 50,000 kernels, there might be 100 left in there. Right? That's clean. Relative, because barley is barley. What's the difference? So if it is a Davar Sheyesh Matirim, they're not even, basically, it's not even Chametz yet. It's just grains, just pieces of barley. They're not Chametz. No wood ever touched it. So now, it's a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. How am I going to pearl the barley at this time of the year when the company's been running Chodesh for a long time already? There's loads of Chodesh in the machinery. So what am I going to do to make it that I could possibly do it later in the season? And that became an important question because, again, they used to do it early. They would do it in June. They would do all the stuff in June. But guess what? From June until Pesach, the stuff is going to spoil. It's going to get buggy. So,
a practical question.
Yeah.
If it stays in its kernel, so it doesn't get buggy.
Right.
And all before it gets buggy, and they go it up, grind it up, and so it doesn't make a difference.
No, it stays for a zillion years. No, farmers like to store it in the grain form. That doesn't get buggy. If they take care of it, it won't get buggy for a million years. Once they make it into flour, then it's gone. So it only has a shelf life of however many weeks or months or whatever it is before it starts to get buggy.
That means, is that also true for a bag of flour?
Mm-hmm.
If I have a bag of flour in my house, at a certain point, I'll open it up and find bugs.
Right. If you have a bag of flour in your house, it says on it it's good until a certain time, and that's not because it's going to spoil per se. It's because it's going to turn buggy. Now, if you stick it in your fridge, then you're okay. The bugs will stay dormant until they're ready. The eggs will stay dormant until they find good environment to hatch in. But if you keep them in the fridge, you'll be fine. But if you don't, if you keep a bag of barley in your pantry for 6 months, it'll have bugs.
Where the bugs coming from?
The bugs are coming because there are bug eggs all over the place, okay? And they can't clean them out. They can do a great job, but in the end, there's going to be some left in there, and you can't get them out.
And it's smaller than the grains of. I'm just trying to understand this. Sorry.
Yeah. Small, really small. So
Are these microscopic or do you see them?
the eggs are microscopic. The eggs are tiny.
As is.
The what?
What do you think they're eating them all the time?
I'm not worried about the egg. I'm worried about when they turn into bugs. That's when you're not eat them.
We're eating eggs.
What?
He's just saying the mice are eating eggs the whole time. And there's nothing we can do.
That's life.
It's good protein.
Cool. Whatever it is, don't worry about it. Okay. So now, so the Gemara says about worms and fish. One of the Amoraim said this. He says, "Ma, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, but Ma, don't tell me when you find worms. I don't want to know about it because if I know it, I won't want to eat it. Don't show it to me. Just feed me the fish. Don't tell me. I know that they're probably in there. Don't tell me, or else I won't want to eat them. Okay? What?
Rabbi Willie salmon.
The what?
The salmon.
Yeah.
Rabbi Willie recently gave us the shear on the decals to lung. So we don't have to say about bugs.
Okay, so like this. So the question was, is there a way to overcome this problem? Is there a way to solve this problem? Okay, is there anything we could do? We have a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. We can't pearl the barley now. We can't do it 6 months ago, and we can't do that. So what are we supposed to do? So they asked this question. The OU was grappling with this question. Okay, and for whatever reason, they brought this question to Rabbi Yashav to ask him what he thought about it. Okay, and he said, run through the machinery 500 pounds of barley or flour or whatever it was. I'm not sure who got up with that number, but 500 pounds of product that you run Yoshon through as a flush, sell that as not Yoshon. Again, so it's like a flush with using Yoshon produce, and then you don't sell that as Yoshon, and then you'll afterwards you could run the regular Yoshon that you have, and it'll be fine. Okay? Now he said 500. The OU decided to do more than that. 500 seemed too little to them. They did a more significant amount. They run a certain amount through. That's like a flush. And then afterwards they run the regular stuff afterwards. Okay, so what was the thinking? Okay, what would be the logic for such a idea? Why would we think that if we run a bunch of bags through to clean out the machinery, that now are we sure that we got everything out? What's the thinking now to say that at this point you should be able to use it? Anybody want to give a thought?
Isn't it a suffix? I'm saying you do it again.
So what's the din of a suffix? You tell me. That's how we're doing it halacha. What's the suffix?
A suffix is something. It's a suffix with the Tevillas. The suffix is there b'chlal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to say that's a possibility. Well, below only gets away the bulk of the items. You are not going to get every single grain out of there. Well, the thought is that maybe the flush does an even better job. Listen, it's not like there's a grain that's been there for 14 years, right? I mean, with not each one gets pushed out by the next one. So you figure, maybe, who knows? Yeah.
The Ramah says it has to be nikar when they got mixed in. In this case, it's not. In this case, I have no clue if it's there anymore, so it's if or not nikar, and therefore it's not a restriction.
Has
No, the Chametz was nikar.
Yeah, the Chametz, it was
in the machine.
Yes.
So you're also, that's what I don't know if it's still there anyway. There was a moment you could point to something and say, this is this.
Yesterday, before I did my flush, was there Chazusah in the machine? Was there Chazusah in the machine yesterday?
Before you flush.
Yes. And now, some of that's left over, and it's potentially in my food.
Why do we assume that something is necessarily left over?
Okay, that's another question.
Well, the machinery, it always is something left
I
over.
know, but see, why is it nikar?
No, why is it not nikar?
It doesn't mean nikar that you can see
It's
it.
something in the character, you're just not sure if it's
It's
something
something when they're on still
It doesn't mean not nikar. Not nikar means that at a moment you can point to it and say this is the Davar.
Okay, so now my one thought I had was this is this is a certain type of response is, what's the reason why, if we have time, I suspect we won't, but if we have time, we're going to talk more about this, but what's the reason why Davar Sheyesh Matirim is also? Okay. So Rashi says is, well, the simple thing like Rashi that is, that why would I eat it now if I could eat it beheter? So it's a certain feeling of, why are you doing this thing that relies on coolers and bittul and things like that when you could do it without that? Well, maybe the answer is that if you tell me that there's no way for me to make flour, I can't have flour from January till Pesach. Okay, every year I won't be able to have flour and barley from January to Pesach. You're not giving me an option. So I can eat this bag of flour after Pesach. That's true, but you're not saying that. You're saying to me you can't eat any flour from January.
You can make it in a factory.
Build a new factory. So it's not a simple, hey, just no problem, eat it tomorrow.
You can't say.
That's the reason why it's
not
not
like
This is like the Aruch HaShulchan.
Then what?
The Aruch HaShulchan we saw last year says that when it comes to Yom Tov, for example, the halacha doesn't dictate your menu. You're going to make a menu that requires something to be cooked on Yom Tov. You like that recipe. So it's okay, make that recipe. The fact that you could have made a different recipe that's actually well done.
Right. So now, in the case of this, when we have an egg that was known to be on this, we don't say, I want to eat eggs today. You say, too bad, eat it tomorrow. But that's because you're giving me, so to speak, reasonable options. Over here, you're saying to me, basically, don't eat anything with flour or barley for the next 3 months. Maybe that's unreasonable. Maybe that's a point that he says, do what you can, so the flush is not a way of saying, I for sure got rid of it. It's like, you have to do reasonable something, do something, flush it out, okay? But then at that point, it's like, what can I do? How much? Davar Sheyesh Matirim only requires me to do so much, okay? That's a possibility.
Why isn't flushing it considered hotzos that you need to do?
That the flushing itself is hotzos. Well, wait. So,
No, you're
You can't sell it to people who will make you Yoshon.
okay, that's not right. I don't
do this.
I don't think that they consider that as a meaningful loss. That the difference between buy sell for this and for this, that's part of the price of selling Chodesh flour is you lose a few bags, you don't lose them. You sell those bags as Yoshon. I don't know if that's as Chodesh. Now, maybe the thought is, another possibility is, maybe he's thinking, it's a sex fake. The first time I flushed it out, the first time I flushed it through, probably it was bottled. Okay, I don't know if there's anything left. Actually, the words we have quoted, Rabbi Yasha said was, "Who even says there's any chodesh left in here after the machinery?" Okay, so it's a suffix if there was the first time, and now in the second time when I run it through, again, every bag I'm going to have a suffix. Is there any chodesh in this one or not? Okay, I only make a chunk with my one little cutie bag. In my bag, is there a chodesh grain in there or not? I don't know if there's a chodesh grain in here. So it's not a suffix, it's a svekzeka. I don't know if there were any in the whole machine altogether. Maybe I flushed it out well. And even if there were, maybe they didn't make it till my bag. Okay, now, there's a question on that. What?
You know the same suffix?
It's why?
The same suffix. Is there chodesh in my bag? That's the question.
Okay, so no, the question is, when I first flushed it through, it could be there's no more, the factory is going to be clean now. There's nothing to be worried about. There's no Tevillas here at all. Then the second part is, now I flushed them through, even if there was one left in the machinery. Okay, that can only get into some bags. Now I don't know so we have a problem. We have a Tevillas of Davar Sheyesh Matirim mixed into my food, but that's not for me. My bag maybe doesn't have anything at all in it. I may be added Tevillas. What? Maybe. So now that's going to answer what I'm about to ask you. If you say it that way, it'll answer like. But I'm going to ask you like this. The Rama says in Siman, you didn't see it, in Siman Kuf Yud, he says there are two opinions as to whether you're Samech on Sveka by Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Okay? So now, the Rama says there's two opinions as to whether you should be Samech on Sveka by Davar Sheyesh Matirim. He says that you should only be Mekel L'tzarech. That's his word. You should do L'tzarech, you could be Mekel. So maybe the answer to it's a Sveka, and the Rama says to be Machmir, but there's a Tzarech. Okay? Forget it. My first answer was like, oh my gosh, we're going to starve. The second answer is, it's L'tzarech. Yeah, it's L'tzarech. Okay, so maybe it could be Samech on a Sveka when it's L'tzarech. L'tzarech, that people should have food for 3 months. That's L'tzarech. Okay? That could be. But there's really more to it, which is, there's a question. I just told you the Rama says in Siman Kuf Yud that if there's a Sveka on Davar Sheyesh Matirim, with two opinions whether you should be Machmir. Well, how could the Rama say that you should possibly be Machmir when you know we're talking about Chodesh? The Rama's well-known, the Rama says in a later sim, is it Reish Tzadik Gimel? When he's talking about the din of Chodesh, he says, you know why people are not Machmir on Yoshon nowadays? You know why where I live they're not Machmir? Is because there's a Sveka. Safek, if this is from this year's grain, and even if it's from this year's grain, maybe this year's grain was planted before Pesach. So really? Wait a second. Davar Sheyesh Matirim. So why are we making on a Svek Seker? So over there we're saying Svek Seker to matter all of Chodesh. So surely Svek Seker to let this. So that's not my question. I mean, it would be your question also, but it's the Shach's question. Okay, the Shach is that question. He says, what happened over here? And the Shach answers that there's two types of Svek Seker relevant to this. One Svek Seker is a Teruvas style Svek Seker. I have one mixture, and then I have another mixture. In that kind of a case, when I have that kind of a Svek Seker, that's when the Rama wants to be machmir to say Svek Seker even by Davar Sheyesh Matirim is also. When there's a Svek Seker that says maybe there was no Isser here at all, like maybe this grain is from last year, or even if it's from this year, maybe it was planted before Pesach, I mean there was no Chodesh here in the first place, then we'd be samach on a Svek Seker of Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Now, how to judge this case is, I don't know how you want to hear this case. In our case, there was definitely Isser here. But, so it's sort of a Taruva style. We mevatel a little bit, and then mevatel it again. But on the other hand, it's a sort of a suffix if it's here at all. I'm thinking about my bag. Is there stuff in my bag, or there's not stuff in my bag? Okay, I'm not sure how you read it that way. Okay, one last thing to tell you, because we're much too much to go. One more thing is, at the OU, Rabbi Belsky had his own idea why it should be mutter. Okay, I'll tell you what he said. It all works right, but it's going to leave us hanging with a question. He said the reason why it's mutter is because it's from something that I'm assuming you saw in Siman Tzadi days. He says, it's trei mashu. He says, the reason why it's mutter is because when I do the first flush, the amount of issa that was left, that's in the first flush, means, think about this, 10 grains left in the machine, and there's 10,000 grains flushed through it. So that's a mixture now of these 10 grains and 10,000 grains. What's left behind in the machine is just a mashku. We're just thinking about the 10 more grains left behind afterwards. That's a taruvas of 10,010 grains. That's one mashku. He says it's asr because Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Now one of those grains falls into my big batch. That's trei mashu. Okay. Now I don't know if you learn Tzadi days. There's a big to do about what it means trei mashu. Okay. So the Shach over there, the way he understands, the way most people understand, like the Shach, is this would qualify for trei mashu. Right? So this would be good. We'd say it would be mutter because it was trei mashu lo yamino. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Essentially, in Tzadi days. That what?
That Shlit Haruvas is mutter. Shach says to be aser. The Baruch Shulchan says even for 3 taruvas upon Shach would be aser.
I have to think about that. I have to think about how that fits with this din of trei mashu. I'm not sure. Okay. The question is, I'm not going to get into this. I'm just going to tell you what's going to leave us with a question, because if it's true that this qualifies as trei mashu, which the number, everything matches up, it should be, we're back to understand. The Shach said that we're only machmir about Svek Seker, about Davar Sheyesh Matirim, when it's a Taruvas type of Svek Seker. A Taruvas type of Svek Seker seemingly is automatically the trei mashu case. So here trei mashu is a reason to be makel. To a Svek Seker, which is a Taruvas style, is a trei mashu. So I'm missing something here in our cheshbon over here. Okay, let me get out of Chodesh. Okay, change the topic. Okay, I'm going to tell you an interesting din about Shemittah. Okay, this is not halacha l'maaseh now for another few years, and that is like this. There's a din on Shemittah called beer, which means to say is when you have produce of Shemittah, you have to eat it by a certain time. If you didn't eat it by that time, you can eat it afterwards, but you have to do a mitzvah called beer. Essentially, in short, you have to make it hefker, make it available to everybody, and then people can eat it. Okay? For purposes of this example, the time of beer for dates is on Purim, and beer for grapes is on Pesach. Okay? Those are in Pesach. Dates on Purim, grapes on Pesach. What happens if I have dates mixed into grapes? Okay? One gives tamen to the other one. Whose time of beer do I follow? The dates, I have to do the mitzvah by Purim, and the grapes I have till Pesach. Whose mitzvah of beer do I follow when one gave tamen to the other one? So the thing is, each one is by itself. Ignore the fact that one is giving tamen to the other one. You don't say, oh, the dates gave tamen to the grapes, and therefore you have to make beer earlier. No, you make beer for each one for itself. Okay. What happens if they cook them together? Okay. What happens if the Shemitah produce gave tam into not Shemitah produce? Okay, you cook dates from Shemitah with dates that were not from Shemitah. Then the din is, the non-Shemitah produce needs to follow the din of the beer of the Shemittah produce. It's Isser the Heter. If you follow the Zman of the Shemittah produce. So now comes out the following. If that happened, min b'minoi, if it was dates into dates, then we say that the dates, going into the dates, is a min b'minoi, Davar Sheyesh Matirim. It's a Davar Sheyesh Matirim because you could eat these dates before Purim. It's not Tachlena Beheter, wait till after Yontav, it's Tachlena Beheter before Purim comes. As long as you eat it before Purim, you're covered. You ate it Beheter, you're okay. Then, if it's min b'mino, we say so it's not bottled no matter what. So if there's one date in 1,000 dates, they have to all be eaten before Purim as a form of Davar Sheyesh Matirim. It's a thing that only, there's a way to eat it beheter. You have to eat it beheter, and we don't say it's bottled, the tam is bottled. No. The tam theoretically is bottled, there's 1,000 to 1, but we say you have to eat it all before Purim. Had the dates been mixed into potato chips, give tam to something else that's min b'she'ena minoi, then all of a sudden the rules of, then Davar Sheyesh Matirim makes no difference, and then we say it's bottled. We say, oh, the tam is bottled. So then all of a sudden the potato chips do not have to be eaten before Purim. Okay, so here's an unusual Davar Sheyesh Matirim where it's not eat it tomorrow, it's that I have a way to eat it beheter by eating it quickly. Okay, if I eat it the right way, I eat it up before Purim, so you could stuff your face with all these dates before Purim, then you're okay. Okay. Yes?
Shouldn't that, this concept, shouldn't that be totally on whether or not we view Chametz as Davar Sheyesh Matirim?
What's the connection?
Because during the year, the only reason why one of the reasons why it should not be considered Davar Sheyesh Matirim is because next year it's going to become...
If we have time, I'm going to talk about that. Okay.
Again.
Yes.
So that should be analogous.
Why is it that?
Because next year it's going to become usher later on.
You know, when it becomes usher, it's usher for good. Once we cross the line to Purim, it's gone. It's hopeless. But I can eat it quickly. Here I have a way to eat it beheter by quickly eating it, not by slowly eating it, by waiting. I can eat it beheter today. If I rush up before Purim, I can eat it up.
Why isn't this a bit like the egg that's a safek treifa, where if it's mutter, so good, it's mutter now. And if it's usher, so then it's butz already. So this, it is mutter now, and when it becomes usher, it's going to be usher forever. And so if it's in a mixture where it's, it really should be butz against whatever's in there, so why don't we say it's like a regular isser that it should be usher forever, and then you can eat it?
It's not, today it's heter. But it has a rule, it has a restriction on it, which is you have to eat it before Purim. So this has to be eaten before Purim, and that the other dates I've filmed didn't have to be eaten before Purim.
But is there? Well, let's say Purim passes, right? I didn't realize.
So if once Purim passes, if you pass the time of beer, if this time would happen after the time of beer, then you're right. We wouldn't say it's a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. But today it's before Purim passed, and now I have what fell in was a Davar Sheyesh Matirim now. Okay, so I don't remember what it is. What happens if it happened before Purim, and then now it's after Purim? I don't know. But when I'm saying this still before Purim, I say, today I can eat it beheter. I have a way to eat it beheter. The way is to eat it quickly. So I have a way to eat it beheter. I have to do that. I'm not allowed to say, well, I want to take my time. I want to eat it later. No, don't eat it tomorrow beheter. Eat it today beheter. So, okay.
You're saying there would be a chiyuv to eat it?
Right. Well,
what's the nature of the question?
There's a response. You can't say, I'll wait, I'm not eating this. I should say, you can't, when it comes Purim, if you haven't eaten it yet, you'll have to make it hefker. Because it had the rules of beer on it. This food got the rules of beer on it that you have
That's not for me. I mean, you can't say...
Yeah, you don't have to eat. I keep saying you have to eat it. You don't have to eat it. You could just make it hefker then. But it has the rules of beer. It has the dinim of Kedusha Shvias to it. You have to treat it like it's Shemittah produce because it is. It has a beer for Shemittah produce. It was bottled 1,000 times. Yeah, it was bottled 1,000 times. But you have a right to be samach on bittul. You can't rely that it was bottled. You have to eat it beheter. You have a way to eat it without running into those issues. Okay. I'm skipping because I'm assuming that you saw that Chazusah.
Yeah.
Okay. In the Ramah. Okay. I'll tell you 1 second. Okay. The Ramah says that if the food that was Davar Sheyesh Matirim gave color, it was malabing the other food, then it's not bottled. Okay. There's 3 major and 1 lamaisa opinions as to what you should do with Chazusah. So some read the Ramah to say is that Chazusah is only not bottled when it's a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. That's the only time that it's not bottled. Some say something with Chazusah is not bottled, but it doesn't make a difference, it's always not bottled. Okay? Some say Chazusah is only not bottled when it's Asr Midaraisa and Asr B'Hanra. You need to have two things in order to make it Asr. Okay? And most people follow what the Pri Chodesh says as the Hachra. I don't believe he says it as a din. He says it as a Hachra, which is when we're talking about a Shaila of an Isra Deraisa, then we say Chazusah is not bottled. We're talking about a Shaila of an Isra Derabanan, then we say it is bottled. Okay, what's an example of that? Just for your curiosity. Example of that is of Asr Midaraisa is there's a coloring made for red, oranges, and purples called carmine. Okay, that coloring is made by crushing up bugs. So they just grind them up, and it makes these really great colors. And, what?
In Britain, they used to have a chocolate called Smarties, they used to still do, and the red was known as having
carmine. Okay.
And all the kids used to take out the reds. They
Really?
From,
Got it.
eat the rest.
Okay, so you may have heard of it. You may have heard of it a couple of years ago. Starbucks very proudly announced that they now have natural colors for their one of their drinks. The orange, it is an orange drink. There's natural colors, and when people found out how natural it was, they said, hey, we'll take the not natural. But they actually know. They said, okay, they came up with they changed to a carrot that was something else that gave natural color. Okay, but it's a really great color. But that's a shaila. That's an issur deraisa. That's just crushed up bugs. So there we would say chazusah is not bottled. If it happened, we would say the food is asur. Okay? And drabanan is there's a color called ino. It has a really long name, but everybody calls it for short ino, which is made from grape skins. Okay, that's asur drabanan. Grapes are only stam yain is only issur drabanan. So if that was bottled into a food by mistake, then most people would follow what Pri Chodesh says that we would say we don't worry about chazusah by issur drabanan. Okay.
Isn't chazusah automatically nikar and then it's not bottled?
Well, that's a question. It's nick or not in its taste. That's a question whether chazusah is or is not bottled. Is that significant enough to say it can't be bottled because it's noticeable? Yes.
Relevant for the sharing gas question.
That's not a question of chazusah. That doesn't. It's true that the casks, the barrels do give color. They help. The aging gives color to it, but I don't think that people think it's from the wine of it. It's the barrel per se. Not if you put it into a new barrel, it looks against. When you buy bourbon that's made in a new barrel, that also has color to it. That's just from the wood. I might be wrong. That's my understanding. Okay, let's move on to something else. What I'm going to tell you now, you'll see as we come around to it, a proof to this question from what it says in Halacha Gimel. And that is like this. I'm going to talk about two different questions that are the same issue, relatively the same issue. Okay? You may have heard this. It has to do with bugs. You may have heard that many years ago, the Starkey Rabbi Heinemann used to have the following opinion. Okay? I say he used to because I don't think that the Starkey, this is an official position anymore. I know Rabbi Heinemann used to hold that. He may still hold like that. I don't want to blame it on the hashgacha because I don't know if they officially follow this opinion anymore. And he would say is, if a person has frozen broccoli, or in some variations even fresh broccoli, you could eat it. You could just eat it. You don't have to worry about the bugs that are in there. Why are you allowed to eat it? Wait a second, there are bugs inside there. Why am I allowed to eat it? So there was a three-part logic to why you're allowed to eat it. Okay? We're going to focus on the first part, but it's a three-part logic. And the first is like this: in a floret, like a broccoli floret, the floret is so packed tightly that the bugs that are in there are hopelessly lost. You're never going to be able to find the bugs that are in there. It's way too difficult to find them packed into that, and particularly the version that had it only with frozen, particularly for frozen broccoli. I mean, there's no way. I mean, you're never going to find what's inside there, bugs that are hiding in there. So that makes it taruvus. So part one is it's a taruvus. It's a taruvus of a bug in the vegetable. The second is that taruvus, the bugs that are in there are obviously batal b'shishim. Right? There's not so many bugs in there that it wouldn't be batal b'shishim. Yeah, the bugs would be batal b'shishim. But the reason why it would not be batal is because it's a barrier. Okay, you have whole bugs in there, and the bugs are barriers. Okay, assuming that the bugs are barriers, they would not be batal. Well, that's only the Rabbanan did. Midaraisa barriers batal. So midaraisa, this would be a taruvus. Part one was that it was a taruvus. Part two is that the isser, the worst isser on this taruvus is drabanan. It's only midrabanan that we're worried about. Maybe there's no bittul. Midaraisa, it would be batal. So now part three is, it's only on every head of broccoli there's a suffix whether there's a bug in here or there's not a bug. Okay? I don't know if there's one in every one. Statistically, I have no way of knowing if there is or there isn't. So it's a suffix. So since it's a taruvus, which is not more than issa drabanan, I have a suffix drabanan. Well, what's the name of a suffix drabanan? Suffix drabanan zakula. Alright, so I say maybe there's an issa drabanan here. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Okay, so I'm allowed to eat it. Okay, so I'm going to go. Okay, that was the three-part steps here. First is the taruvus. Second is the taruvus can't be more than issa d'Rabbanan. Third is, and since it's only a suffix, therefore it should be mutter. Okay, now, there are questions on the second and the third point. We're going to focus on the first part. Is this thing a taruvus? Is what we're looking at a bug in a floret? Is that a taruvus or is it not a taruvus? Okay, and seemingly what it depends on is the following. There's going to be a din you'll see when you get to Siman Kuf Daled, which is that if you have Isser and a Heter mixed together, but it's efshar to get out the Isser out of the mixture, then you can't rely on the rules of Bittul. Okay, the example there is, if you have, you cook some chicken fell into soup, if you, as it is now, it's all mixed, you pull a piece of chicken out, but this chicken fat has spread through the soup. Okay, as it is now, there's no way to get it out. How are you going to find the chicken fat in there? Well, but if you put it in the fridge and you let it cool off, the chicken fat will congeal and you'll be able to skim it off. So we say you can't say it's a taruvas. Don't say the chicken fat is buckled into the thing. It's mixed in, and follow the rules of it. You say, no, I can get it out. I can filter it out. Okay? That din, that if you can get it out, you're not allowed to rely on bittul. Is that a din deraisa, or is that a din derabanan? Machlokes. Very good. It is a machlokes. Is it a din deraisa? What do I mean when I say deraisa derabanan? When I say it's a din deraisa, would mean is to say it's not a taruvas. It's like if I have 3 packages of food, and 2 of them are kosher and 1 is treif. I don't say it's butter b'roiv. It's mutter. It's ridiculous. It's not butter b'roiv because I know which is the kosher, I know which is the treif. The rules. It's called hilchas taruvas for a reason. You only follow these rules if you have a taruvas. You have isser and heter mixed together. But if they're not mixed together, well, why are you saying following rules of bittul? Just take the isser on the side and put the heter on the side. So one argument is that if I can separate the isser from the heter, then I don't have a taruvas. So I didn't get to that page in Shulchan Aruch. The heading said hilchos taruvas. Well, don't open these pages yet until you make it into a taruvas, not a taruvas. Okay. And the other side is that the Rabbanan says that basically you can't separate them. Okay. Basically these two things are mixed together. You can't get them separated from one another. If they're not separated from one another, it's a taruvas, and the rules are by taruvas. There's rules of bittul, b'shishim, or whatever the rules are. So if there's midrabanan, the Rabbanan said, no, don't be so kal, don't take it like that. You have to separate the isser out, and then you can eat the food. Okay, so that's a big question in the Achronim, whether this din of efshel asanoi is a din deraisa or din drabanan. Okay, what's an afkamina? Why do I care if it's a deraisa or drabanan? Kilko. Okay, that's a variation of what I was about to say, which is, what happens if it's really hard to separate them from one another? Okay? What happens? I was going to say if it's very hard. You're saying, I'm going to lose something by separating them. Okay? So then, if it's a din deraisa, we say, well, you're not going to eat the food because there's isser here. If you want to get the isser out, then you can eat it. We don't have rules of bittul yet because there's isser in here. Get the isser out before you start eating. It's going to cost you money. You're going to lose some. So too bad on you. I mean, that's just life. There's isser in here. You can't eat it. Okay? If it's a din d'Rabbanan, then the din d'Rabbanan only requires you to go so far. At a certain point, you say that much they weren't mechayiv you to do. So if it's going to cost you a loss, or it's going to be very difficult to do it, then at some point we're going to cross the line and we're going to say, at this point, Chacham didn't require you to do that. Okay? So, the Badi Yoshon says, he thinks that's totally, that's the basis of the machlokes between the Rashba and the Ra'ah. Okay? The Rashba and the Ra'ah who talk about whether you have to kasher keilim in order to get the isser out, it depends on that machlokes. Because if the Rashba, they both agree that it's considered an expense, a hassle to have to kasher keilim. Okay, the Rashba says you don't have to kasher keilim. That much Chacham don't require you to go to such lengths to get the isser out of the food. Just eat it the way it is. You could get it out. You could, but that much you don't have to go because he's looking at the getting isser out as a din d'Rabbanan. Okay, he's looking at that as a rabbinic requirement. The Chacham didn't require you to go that far. Now the Shach and Tas say no, they did require you to go that far, but that's a side argument. But basically they agree with what the Rashba says, which is you only have to go so far, and kashering is considered too much. You don't have to do that much. And the Ra'ah says, he says, I don't understand. There's isser in here, I can get it out. If I have to get it out, I don't care what it takes to get it out. Okay, there's a Marul who talks like that. He says, I don't care what it takes to get it out. Whatever it takes. I don't care, get it out, you have to get it out. Meaning, because he's looking at it as a deraisa din. If it's not a taruvas, if you in any way in the world can get it out, then you have to get it out. Okay, so now, if that would be correct, that that's the machlokes, that this shayla nachronim is really machlokes, the Ra'ah and the Rashba, well, what's the din about that? Okay? It's in Halacha Gimel right here. We pass on to Rashba. Okay? Again, the Shachantas argue on the detail of whether working hard, whether kashrut is considered too much or not too much. Okay? That's sort of like a detail to the point. The point is, we overall seem to pass like the Rashba, that the din is, that depends, that if it's too hard, you don't have to do it. So then that should tell me that should support what Rabbi Henderman said. Okay? That supports his point, which is, if food are mixed together, and it's possible to get that, you could get the Isser out of there, but it would be ridiculously difficult to get the Isser out of there, then he's arguing that's midoraisa, it's a taruvis, midorabanan it's not, and therefore he follows on with what he has to say. Okay, now I'm only telling you this one part of that argument. There are other reasons to possibly disagree with him, but this part that has to do with our din, that's why I mentioned it. Yes.
I was wondering, in that dispute of that modem, so does everyone get switched out to things without way, like whether I would say it's the ability to get keilim about is a deriser. You're above it. The deriser is telling us what was Rashba.
I saw about the Yoshon says, I don't remember if there are others who connected. Yeah, he connects the two of them. He said that they're connected to each other. Okay, now, another example of that same question was, you may remember a year or two ago, maybe it's even longer by now, people were talking about bugs in orange juice. Okay? You're not familiar? Okay. Well, so what it is just in short, on the skin of oranges live these little bugs called scale insects. Okay? You don't see them so commonly in the United States because the oranges that they sell for the public, they spray them and they make sure there are no scale insects on them. But the oranges that they sell in other countries where people don't care so much about how things look, and the oranges that they use to make orange juice, where no one's going to see the peel anyhow, they have loads of scale on them. Okay, they have lots of these things living on the outside of the oranges. Okay, now we're not here to discuss whether it's really mutter usher, because whether those things are really usher or not, you could ask Rabbi Willig or you could ask me afterwards. That's not relevant to whether those bugs are really usher or not. Okay, they're really small. Okay, small is really an understatement to describe what they are. Okay, but whether they're usher or not is not the point that I'm trying to focus on now. Let's say the bugs are usher. Okay, that would be a really big let's say. But let's say the bugs would be usher. Okay, now the bugs are in my orange juice. When they squeeze them out, they get into the juice. Okay, so now they're in my juice. Okay, in order to get the bugs out of my juice, I have a couple of oranges now, and in there's a bug floating around. Is that a teruvis or is it not a teruvis? What did you say?
We're not talking about that.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about am I required to go to the length? I'm out of Davar Sheyesh. I'm just use this as a riot to that. Am I required to go in order to get it out? I watch people get it. Now they tell me there are newer, fancier ways to get it out, but I watch guys get it out. They put it through a cloth that had such fine holes in it that the oranges couldn't get through. Okay, when you think of oranges, like it pours through things. Well, this was so fine that it had to like drip really slowly through it, and then afterwards they had to then pick through between all the mush that was left on top, all the particles they left on top, and pick through to find the bugs that they were in there. Okay, if you have bionic eyes, you could find the bugs that are on top there, and they pull them out. So that was such an amazing amount of effort and expertise to do it that if it's a din d'Rabbanan to have to get, if this is only d'Rabbanan, not teruvis, you don't have to go that far. Okay, there were even people who said even if it's a deraisa, you don't have to go that far. Okay, there's a limit even to deraisa how far you have to go. But yes.
But Rabbi Willig, when he gave this share about bug checking, he thought there was a different angle on the tircha point, different than this. His point was the tircha relates to the suffix of what the likelihood is it'll be in here.
Okay.
Meaning, even if you're a machmer and say that min ha-Torah, that's called mikar iser, if you would be matriach to get it out, that's only when you know that there's a bug in here. But if I have a glass of orange juice, if I don't know that there's a bug in here, I'm okay to check.
So I don't know what Rabbi Willig said, but if you look, and then what I'm saying may not be purely accurate from the din side of it, not from the Metzias. On the Metzias side of it, there was like at least a bug every cup. So there were bugs in there. Whether that makes them in din, I'm pretending that it does. I'm not sure that it does. But there are lots of bugs in there. Okay? Lots of those things in there. Whether those things are, there are the bugs. Whether there are also bugs. Not every bug is also, okay. But so it's the same question, which was, if it's a din d'Rabbanan, I'm for sure not required to go to such lengths to separate the taruvas and say I can avoid the taruvas by doing X, Y, and Z. If it's a din d'Oraisa, even then there were those who argued, even if it's a d'Oraisa, you don't have to go to such lengths. Okay? But when it's a d'Oraisa, it's a different story. All of a sudden, having to work hard may not be an excuse to not to do it. Yes?
So, think the obvious don't sound like this is obvious. According to, if you took the Machmir approach on this, then you could never, really employ bittul, because you could send every food item to a laboratory that would put it in a centrifuge.
It's a really good question. I'll tell you a variation of the question. And that was, Rabbi Shlomo Miller, he said like this. He said this. He was talking about a variation, not exactly the question, but a variation. He said like this. He said, if it's true that no matter if I can get it out somehow, then it's not bottled. He says, what's the din that burial loy betela? What's the example where a burial is not going to be bottled? He says, if it's a burial, means it's complete. It's a whole thing. Now, a burial of a grain that was someone worshipped by the Zara. Okay, so you can't tell it one from the next one. Okay, but if there's a bug, burial of a bug. Didn't talk about that. It's not. I don't know if it's a Gemara, but they didn't in Shulchan Aruch about that. So a burial of a bug means is that if I see it, I could see it's a bug. So what would be the example that it's bottle, except that it's a burial, therefore it's not bottle? If I came across it, it would be a bug. So what would be the example that it could be? It would theoretically bottle, but only not bottle because of a burial. It means it is a taruvis, but since it's a burial, it's not bottle. Doesn't that tell you that there are things that are so hard to find, they're so hopelessly lost that they're considered taruvis? Even though when you banged into it, you would actually see it, right? He says that you could come up with scenarios of how it could be. There could be camouflage situations where you wouldn't see it, but he says, but essentially, you're making it that din being such an odd, strange case that it's hard to believe. Okay, we therefore that's an argument to support that there's a limit, maybe even on a derisive level. At a certain point, you say it's so mixed in that it's a tarus. That's why I said even on the derisive level, it might be good enough. Okay. Next. Do you guys have patience with me still? Okay. Now,
let me know when we have mincha.
what time is mincha? 3:20. Okay, fine, no problem.
Anything I have to say?
The Shulchan Aruch and Halacha Gimel talked about whether kashering something is considered to be so difficult or so hard that I don't have to kasher something to get the bli out of it. Okay? Maybe if there's a tarubas, meaning I have one treif spoon and there's 50 kosher spoons, I don't know which is which, I could say it is or is not a Davar Sheyesh Matirim because I could get the Isser out, but kashering is at such a difficulty that I'm not required to go to those lengths to eat it beheter. Okay, that's for kashering. What about if the same question would happen for Tevillas keilim? Okay, I have one spoon that I didn't tevel, and I dropped it into 50 other spoons that were teveled, and now there's a way to make it mutter. It's a lot easier than kashering. What am I going to do? Just dunk it in the mikveh. Okay, so that's easy. So do I say that techlena be'isr, techlena beheter? Why be samecham bittul? And say that each spoon that I picked up is probably the mutter spoon, the one that had Tevillas keilim to it, the head Tevillah. Well, I just say it's going to tevel all the spoons. Should I say the same thing? Should I say that just like by Hagol there's a question, and Tevillah should be the same thing, and Tevillah is a lot easier also. Okay, so I found an interesting disagreement about this. And that's like this. In Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says the following. He says that rule that we say Acha techlenu be'isr achola beheter only applies if there's a, so to speak, side way to avoid the isser. For example, I have an egg that was noel b'yontif. Maybe this is an egg that might have been noel b'yontif. I can eat it tomorrow. Okay, I'm not going to resolve the suffix, but I can eat it tomorrow. I can avoid the isser. I have a treif belia. I can avoid the problem of that treif belia being floating around in all my food by kashering it and separating and pulling it out of the way. He says, but when I have a question if this kli needs Tevillas keilim or not, I don't know if it does or doesn't need it. He says, the resolution you're offering to me is not to find a side way to get to the heter. You're saying is, be machmir. That's what you're telling me. You're saying is, do the Tevillah. He says, well, that's not what techlena beheter means. Techlena beheter doesn't mean is, you could be machmir. Techlena beheter means is, you have a side way of skirting the issue. Which is, you could wait till tomorrow to eat the egg. You don't have to decide if this is the mutter egg or the usher egg. I will never know which is the mutter egg and which is the usher egg. But I'll eat it tomorrow. So I have a way to eat it as I have like an outside way of avoiding the isser. I could avoid the shaila instead of passing the shaila. Over here, you're not telling me avoid the shaila. You're saying to me, be machmir on the shaila. He said, be machmir on the shaila is not my requirement. That's not what it means when we say Davar Sheyesh Matirim. You should just avoid the shaila. You should be machmir on the shaila. Yes.
This is analogous to say, for example, I have a spoon which I take a nether on. It falls amongst a bunch of other spoons.
Okay.
So meaning now, so the spoon, so the question is...
So there, I have a way to get out of the isser, a side way. I'd be matir nether. He's saying is, if the only way to do it would say, so don't eat from any of the spoons. You just get a different spoon. He said, that you wouldn't be required to do. You say, right, he said, if you say to me, don't use any of these spoons, that's not giving you a way out. That's saying it's just being machmer on everything. That I'm not required to. But being matir neder is a way out of the shaila. We don't know which is the spoon that I made the neder on. I don't know which one, but I can get away to the shaila from a side way. I have a way out of the shaila without addressing the question. So why rely on the letter of the law when you have a way to avoid the whole shaila altogether? Yes.
My pizza, it's not Yom Tov, so I want to have it for my Yom Tov meal. Can I do it? No, wait until tomorrow.
It's an alternative.
So
It's not really an alternative. You're saying be machir and don't eat it for your Yom Tov meal.
So you're saying that's as if addressing the shaila itself. I'm saying I'm addressing the shaila itself by being machir on the shaila itself. Okay. He sees it as an outside way of doing it. Now he has a right to it. As a hammer, he says, there's a din. A person has to be mafresh chal. And chal's chutz aretz, hafarshas chal and chutz aretz has a lot of coolness to it. It's a very weak mitzvah drabanan. Okay, it's a very low level mitzvah drabanan. Okay, whatever we want to call it. Okay, it's a very kal din. And in all kinds of cases, we say, it's only a question of chal's chutz aretz. You could be making about whatever shaila because it's only chal's chutz aretz. Okay, every page you turn in Hilchos Chal, that comes up on every page, but it's often enough of it's a shaila chal. He says, you know how much it takes to be mafresh chal and chutz aretz? He says, just one little speck. He says, so why do we ever say be makel on chal's chutz aretz? Yeah, it's a very easy thing. You can be makel on it. He says, take off one speck and say, this is the challah. Boom, I did the hafarsha. That's easy. Doesn't cost you anything. Not hard. Big deal. Take one piece. You can take even a mashu. Take a little piece. Okay, this is the challah. That's it. So why do we ever say you could be makeup for chal's chutz aretz? Why don't we say is techlana b'isur, techlana b'heter? Avoid the shaila. I'll be mafresh. I take a little piece and I'll be mafresh a piece. Okay, you see that crumb that's going into the garbage? That's the challah. Done. I'm finished. Why don't we say that? Elamai, because that saying is you have to be machmer on the shaila. That's not saying to have a way to avoid the isur. I don't have a way to avoid the isur. You're saying is too bad on you. You have to be mafresh in you. Now I gave you an easy way how to do it, but I didn't give you a way to avoid the isur. I told you just to be machmer on this and that you're not required to do. Okay, that's how he looks at it. In contrast, in Rav Moshe has a tshuva about a person who has a glass dish. So glass is only chayav in Tevillas, keilim, and drabanan. Comes from a factory, and he's not sure if the factory was owned by a Jewish person or not. If the factory is owned by a Jewish person, and it was in Jewish hands till I got it, then it doesn't need Tevillas, keilim. If it was owned by someone who was not Jewish, then it does require Tevillas, keilim. So I don't know whether it was or was not. So Rav Moshe says, if you could figure out, if you could find out, you have to be var. Okay, that's a pretty traditional din, that if you have a suffix drabanan, you say, after levar, you have to be mevared. He says, if you can't be mevared, you can't figure it out whether it's Jewish home. The person who made it was Jewish. He says, then, if there's a big tircha to tevel it, then you could be making a suffix drabanan l'kula. Which at the end of the sentence is, but, you have to say this, but if it's not a big tircha, like in my case of spoons, so go tevel it, big deal. Don't make it to do about it, and just go tevel it. Why is he saying that? Why is he saying if it's not a big tircha, you have the suffix, why don't you say suffix drabanan l'kula? So what is he saying? He's saying is, you have a suffix, and the way to avoid the isser is to just dunk it in the mikveh. You don't just say, well, suffix drabanan l'kula. He's saying along the line, he doesn't use the words, but it's along the lines of Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Why eat it be'isser? Why have a spoon in your house that maybe needs to be tevel, a plate, a glass plate? Why keep it in your house that might need to be tevel? Just go tevel it. Avoid the problem, don't have problems. Okay? So that's along the lines of saying that it's a Davar Sheyesh Matirim style. It's not really Davar Sheyesh Matirim. The Davar Sheyesh Matirim style thought, and yet he's saying that even though what he's telling you is to just be machman. That's what he's telling you. Yes?
So perhaps it's not really a steer to the klal of Davar Sheyesh Matirim. It's a steer to the klal of Sveka D'Rabbanan L'Kula.
That
what Moshe is saying is that, every time you have a Sveka D'Rabbanan, it should always be machman unless it's an annoyance.
Well, usually when something is usher, that means it's usher. You lost something. Something you can't do it. It's automatically a difficulty. Here's an issur d'Rabbanan that is an easy way out of it. You just dunk in the mikveh.
Rav Moshe, maybe I'm just saying, if you take Rav Moshe's extension, so then you should say, look, you own today. You have 3 flats of eggs in your house. You have 100 eggs. So you have this egg, it's a suffix, maybe, so throw it down. Be machmir.
That's automatically every time you talk about that kind of a question, you're talking about a law. So throw the egg in the garbage.
Yeah,
so over here, because here it's Tevillas, keilim. Tevillas, keilim means the chumrah doesn't mean lose it. The chumrah just means go dunk in the mikveh. Big deal. It's a sort of like a temporary chumrah. It's not a chumrah that has any real significance. Unless it's really hard. I mean, imagine if it's only difficult. Then he says, then you don't have to.
kind of like what kind of hagdara is that?
Well, the Hagdara is that Shafik Darbanon heating. When we say that you could be makel on a Darbanon, it's only unless it's easy to avoid the Isser. And avoid the Isser because it's a style of a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Why eat it by Isser?
Logically, then you should say the same thing about one egg. One egg, it costs you 10 cents.
So you're saying that if it's not a significant amount.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. According to Rashi, you would have to be machmir in all those cases.
Okay, interesting. So you're supporting what Shlomo Zalman said, which is when the Safik Darbanon, when the why eat it by Isser means is therefore be machmir on the shayla. That's not what you have to do. Okay, that's an argument.
It's not really Davar Sheyesh Matirim.
No, it's not at all Davar Sheyesh Matirim. No, it's a style. It's in that style. I'm using in that form.
Unless it's a big deal.
Right now.
Okay. Okay, but in this case, it's.
Okay. Okay. If we have another few minutes, I'll just talk about Chametz a little bit. Okay. Last thing, talk about Chametz.
Oh man, it's not in the base of time we already talked about.
Well, no, wait. So you learn Davar Sheyesh Matirim. It's about Chametz and Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Okay. So there's a machlokes Rishonim whether Chametz is Davar Sheyesh Matirim. What does that mean? Chametz before Pesach is bottled like everything, like anything else. Regular rules of bittul. So if some chametz falls into food today, it's bottled like regular rules. There's no questions at that point. It's for sure. It's bottled like regular rules. Okay, which is good for most of us because most of the food we eat on Pesach is made long before Pesach. Most of the packaged food we make is made before Pesach. Anytime there's something, a shayla comes up with those things, it's a regular set of rules. Bittul works like anything else. What happens if chametz is mixed into food on Pesach? It's also b'mashu. Okay, no bittul, even mimish enemy, no bittul at all. That's also an easy question. The shayla is, what about an Erev Pesach? An Erev Pesach, the chametz is not asur b'mashu yet. Doesn't come in asur b'mashu till Yontif starts. So on Erev Pesach, is there such a thing? Do we say chametz is Davar Sheyesh Matirim? Why is it Davar Sheyesh Matirim? Because I can't, even though it's asur to eat today, but I can eat it tomorrow. Okay, I'll eat it at the Pesach. It'll be mutter. Okay. Now you're going to ask me, of course. It's a Raman about that. About why don't we say it's going to be chametz all of Pesach? Okay, put that on the side for now. Okay, but it's a machlokes Rishonim whether it should be Davar Sheyesh Matirim or not. Because today it's asur. Come 9 days from now, it's going to be mutter. When Pesach ends, it's going to be mutter. So the Rambam holds that it is. He says it's Davar Sheyesh Matirim. So it's not asur b'mashu in the typical sense, but it is a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Davar Sheyesh Matirim means min b'mina. It's not bottle. Okay, it's asur. It's b'mashu min b'mina. The Mechaber, the Ramah, and many others, which is what we do, follows what the Mordechai says, that it's not considered Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you in a second, a hezber, just what the Mordechai means. Okay, but the Mordechai says it's not Davar Sheyesh Matirim. So, before I get to what the Mordechai says, I just want to tell you two exceptions to that rule. That even though we paskin that chametz before Pesach is not a Davar Sheyesh Matirim, there are two places where we were machmir that it is a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Okay, and they are when the case I was just talking to you about, when keilim get mixed in with each other. Okay, I pull out a spoon on Erev Pesach in the afternoon, and I can't figure out is this from the year-round set or is it from the Pesach set? Okay, is this a Pesach spoon or a year-round spoon? Or some things got mixed together. So there, if it's Davar Sheyesh Matirim, if it's a Davar Sheyesh Matirim, then I would say is you can't use it. Wait till after Pesach to use the spoon. Don't use it on Pesach. Okay, here's not a Kashrus. I say wait till after Pesach to use it. And if it's not Davar Sheyesh Matirim, I'd be allowed to use it right away. So there, even though we pass on the chametz is not Davar Sheyesh Matirim, we're in keilim. When keilim get mixed in, or we don't know which is a kli, we say that it, so to speak, is a Davar Sheyesh Matirim, and you cannot use that kli. Okay, even though it happened on Erev Pesach before Pesach happened, we say that it is, so to speak, a Davar Sheyesh Matirim, except there are tzadim lahakol. Okay, there are those. If we throw in some other tzadim, then we'll be making. But as a rule, we're machmir about keilim. The second thing is that if there's a spec on something, then I've mentioned to you before, the Ramah says we should try to be machmir about spec of Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Well, and for this purposes, we consider chametz to be a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Even though we really don't consider Davar Sheyesh Matirim, but in these purposes, spec is not going to be mutter, except in the cases where spec would be mutter for Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Ramah said l'tzorech, it's mutter, so it's not always asur. But if it's not l'tzorech, then we would say Davar Sheyesh spec on chametz before Pesach, on chametz and Erev Pesach would be asur. Yes.
Why are we splitting?
Why are we what?
Like why why are we saying in one sense it is Davar Sheyesh material, not?
So I'm going to sort of explain to you in 1 second. Okay, I'm going to explain to you in a second. You'll hear what, when I explain to you the Mordechai, then hopefully this will make sense to you. Okay, so those are the sort of exceptions. Okay, so what was the logic of the Mordechai? What did the Mordechai say? Why is it not Davar Sheyesh material? Lamai says it's usher today, and tomorrow's going to be mutter. Come 10 days from now, you're allowed to eat it. Today I can't eat it. 10 days from now I can't eat it. Okay, so the Mordechai says that that Chametz is Chosher Isuroi. Even though it's going to be mutter in 10 days from now, when Pesach ends, I'm going to be allowed to eat the Chametz. In a year from now, I'm not going to be able to eat it again. And therefore, it's not a regular Davar Sheyesh material. Okay? That's what the Mordechai says. Okay, now, what does that mean exactly? That's what I'm going to try to explain to you. What does that mean? It's true that in 10 days from now, it's going to be mutter, and then in a year from now, it's going to be usher. Well, at first glance, it doesn't make sense, because what's the problem? I have a way to eat a beheter, and I have a way to eat a be'isser. Every year, there are 8 days that I can't eat it, or 8.5 days I can't eat it, and 300 and who knows how many days that I can't eat it. So eat it in the heter way.
Sounds like a run.
That what?
I mean, in a sense, it's always going to be going through heter, so it doesn't have that.
So, good. So the Aruch Shulchan says, one shot you could say is as the way the Ran says. The Ran says that the reason why Davar Sheyesh Matirim is not bottle, the reason why Davar Sheyesh Matirim is not bottle is because in cases where it's Davar Sheyesh Matirim, we pass on Rabbi Yehuda that min b'mina is not bottle. Usually min b'mina, we argue on Rabbi Yehuda because we say that every min b'mina is really min b'she'ena mina, because it's isr to heter. That in itself identifies this as not min b'mina. It's sort of a not min b'mina. But if so that in cases where it's Davar Sheyesh Matirim, it's going to be heter tomorrow, so then it's more similar to the heter. It's not min b'she'ena mina because it is min b'mina. They're both potatoes, and this potato is mutter, this potato is also mutter. It's not always usher, it's only temporarily usher. So the Shulchan says, so, if it's going to be sometimes mutter and sometimes usher, now it swings back to being a case where we would not possibly Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, that's one way. And even according to Rashi, I believe the Aruch Shulchan says this also. Rashi says, "Asher techlenu be'isr achol beheter." Rashi is understood, or the Mordechai understands that you only say that when it's going to come a point, or it's going to come a situation that I'm going to be free and clear. I could just say is, come tomorrow, when Yontif's over, I'm free and clear, I can do whatever I want to. Okay? But if I'm going to be restricted after that, it's going to fluctuate back and forth between mutter and usher. So then it's already like sort of like burdening me too much. That's not like realistic. Eat it only on these days, only on Tuesdays, not on Wednesdays. Okay, so it's not so simple to say that over here, because over here it's basically mutter. It's 8 days a year that it's usher. Okay, but that's considered. The Mordechai is holding, if he holds like Rashi, that it's enough to say that it's not Davar Sheyesh material. Okay, any more questions? Yes.
The food will go bad before next Pesach, so it's now Davar Sheyesh material.
Yes, because it will never be Chosher Isuroi. Yes, I would say that, yes. Which is pretty common, right? Then you would say it's never going to come back to being heter again. It's come, Pesach is over, I'm allowed to eat it for good. I believe that would be correct.